Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I would like to share my thoughts on Written on the Body by Jeanette Winterson. This book follows an unnamed narrator discussing their various love affairs before ultimately falling in love with Louise. Then we get various meditations on love and loss over 190 pages, what love means and what it will make a person do, what it looks like, its various forms. This is a tragedy at times. There is something Shakespearean about it, not just in the way that Winterson writes, which reads like poetry at times. I've struggled with this author's work in the past and I've absolutely no idea what it was in another book that spurred me on to read this one. Indeed, I'd actually got plans to remove this from my shelves unread, and then I decided, well, I'll read a page or two, and I found myself utterly gripped by this tale because of the way in which Winterson writes. I wouldn't say it's because it's full of quotable moments, but what I would say is that there were many moments within the prose where I felt as though the author was speaking directly to something within me. I have always been fond of books that discuss death and grief. I've talked about this. It's probably a weird thing about me, but as somebody who experienced a lot of grief when they were younger, I now find myself perhaps finding solace and kinship with discussions of grief within narratives. And I got that here. I shared a passage from this book in my most recent reading vlog, in which the author discussed death and what death does to a person, loss does to a person. And when I read that, it's one of those moments where I just had to close the book and just sit there and dwell on what the author had said. When I first started reading this book, I believed that it would be a book that I read in 1 or 2 hours and was just over in a sitting, basically. Admittedly, I did start a new writing project at the same time, but what actually happened with the reading of this was that I chose to take more time with it, to allow what Winterson was saying to fully percolate. The narrator is such an interesting character because they give this almost warts and all style biography of their life, all of the things that they've done wrong in love before, the mistakes they've made in their earlier relationships. And I think that that really can speak to anybody who's gone through these sorts of situations. We know that when we move on to another relationship, oftentimes I think that we're trying not to recreate mistakes that we've made in the past, and we're trying to bring the best of ourselves from those relationships and leave the worst behind. And the narrator talks about this here, but also talks about how things can still get messy, talks about the affairs that they have had with married women. Indeed, their love interest here is a married woman, and they believe it is going to stay as just this affair that never becomes fulfilled. It's going to be a case of unrequited love. Indeed, as a reader, that's what you're led to believe you're going to be getting throughout this book. And then you get mention of a serious illness, and that almost feels like the final nail in the coffin for this book. But it gave me something very interesting to think about, because oftentimes lately I've realised when it comes to discussing love, what we're actually looking at is more a discussion of possession, and how when a person falls in love with another person, they seem to want to possess their every being, their every single particle. They want that. And then here we have this disease that's introduced that is also possessing this person, and it almost becomes this thing of that is what both love and death are. They are the most serious cases of possession that we can see, and they often elicit exceptionally strong emotions. This book is a very intense, short read, and I adored every single moment of it. There was not a page that went by where I didn't find myself reveling in the author's prose. And I don't often get that. I don't often read a book and sit there thinking about how I look forward to going back and rereading that passage again and again. I've talked about friends doing that in the past, and I felt like I've never understood them until now, until I read this book. And I understand that this book is not going to be for everyone. I know from reading this book that other people will find it pretentious and over the top and flowery, but I adored it. There's no other way of saying it. I thoroughly adored Written on the Body by Jeanette Winterson. It hasn't made me want to go and read everything this author has ever written. However, it has made me feel more comfortable in future in going and picking up this author's work. My reason for being reticent all this time is because of reading one book for university and feeling like I didn't particularly get it. Now, being the age I am, having read the literature that I have read, I'm now wondering whether I'm mature enough to be able to understand what Winterson is saying, and it makes me feel like I can go back to her work and have a completely different experience that I didn't get before. I really do look forward to going back and reading Written on the Body again in future, and I don't mind if this is the only Winterson I enjoy, but I do think that it's a Winterson people ought to read. Oftentimes I think with this author, everyone just thinks of oranges are not the only fruits, or why be happy when you can be normal, when there is a brilliant meditation on love and death and life right here. And that's my thoughts on Written on the Body by Jeanette Winterson. If you've read this one and would like to discuss it, then please feel free to do so in the comments. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, because until next time, that is all.